Okay, Year 7, welcome to Tuesday's lesson. We are on the 20th of July, and your title is The Tempest. Awake, dear heart, awake, or at least just The Tempest. Okay, so as you can probably fathom by now, that I am in isolation or self quarantine, I think the word is. Okay, I'm not poorly myself, but I was in close contact with somebody that was, so I'm fit and well, but having to teach you from home. So, guys, I'm really hoping that by now our lovely helpers have given out the pink books, that you have a pen, that you're ready to begin. Now, you're going to hear my voice. I'm going to talk you through the lesson, but we're also really, really lucky to have some wonderful member of staff with you today. Is it a he? Is it a she? We don't know, but we know that they are wonderful and here to help you. But I'm going to do the primary teaching. I'm going to talk us through. And at key points in the lesson, there'll be moments where we're directed to stop, to pause, and to respond to some activities, okay? So are we ready? Okay, The Tempest, 20th of July, 2021. So guys, your daily review task. Now we have got 4 statements, but each statement has some right and wrong choices. So you have to decide what is the right choice to complete each idea. Now, for each of these 4, you must copy each statement in its entirety. So you're going to end up with 4 sentences in your book. When you get to a red, it's going to give you a choice to make. You have to make the best choice based on your knowledge and understanding of the work so far. Okay, so let's look at number 1. So far, the play is focused on the theme of love, power, revenge. So you choose one of those red words that you think best completes that idea. So have we been focusing on love? Have we been doing a lot of work on Miranda and Ferdinand? Have we been looking at the use of power, wise and unwise power? Have we been talking anything or at all about revenge? So you make your choice for number 1 and you copy and complete the entire statement. Number 2, comic relief is used to build on this idea / offer a change in focus from the serious to the funny. So what do you think comic relief is being used to do? To build on this idea or to offer a change from the serious to the funny? So you make your choice for number 2. Now for number 3, you have to choose which 3 characters are used in the subplot. So is it Trinculo, Stefano and Ariel? Is it Trinculo, Stefano and Caliban? Or is it Trinculo, Sebastian and Caliban? And 4, Shakespearean comedy is the same / different to modern comedy. So remember, you are choosing from the options in red which idea best completes the sentence. Okay, so I'm going to ask that lovely adult in the room with you just to press pause. And we've got 4 statements, so I reckon maybe about a minute per statement with an extra minute thrown in for good measure. So we don't want to be doing any longer than about 4.5, 5 minutes. Off you go, guys. Okay, so hopefully you've got your 4 statements down. Now we're going to mark and just give ourselves a mark out of 4. So let's have a look. Number 1, so far the play is focused on the theme of power. So if you've got power as the right answer, give yourself a tick. Absolutely, we've been looking at the relationships of power, characters that use power wisely, characters that use it unwisely, how power can be used and misused. That has definitely been a focus for us, and that's quite a serious focus. We've even looked at colonialism and the idea of power being used to take over the land and the place of other people, of indigenous people. So the play starts with quite a serious focus on this theme of power. So comic relief is introduced to offer a change in focus from the serious to the funny. So in comes comic relief, which is where we're picking up with today, and it's offering a change in focus from the serious to the funny. So which 3 characters are used in that comic subplot? I hope you got it right. It's Trinculo, Stefano, not Sebastian, and Caliban, not Ariel. So these are our 3 characters. They're all part of the comic subplot. Trinculo and Stefano are 2 survivors from the shipwreck. Both of them are servants, so butlers and a jester. And Caliban are indigenous, kind of native to the island, our natural islander, born there, and yet somebody that's lost his power when the others arrived. Okay, now the last bit to remind ourselves is that Shakespearean comedy is different to modern comedy. Modern comedy doesn't need to offer a serious counterpoint. It doesn't often engage with serious themes. Okay? Whereas Shakespearean comedy is different to modern comedy. It's not comedy in the sense that everything is funny. It's a comedy in the sense that it uses a comic subplot. It uses misconceptions and misunderstandings. It has a happy ending. But actually, it can deal with some quite serious, dark themes, which is why comic relief is a really important counterfoil to that mood. So guys, give yourself a mark out of 4. Brilliant. Now, we started with this big question last week and we're going to finish it today. So how does Shakespeare provide comic relief? So we now know we need comic relief, okay, to set against or to be juxtaposed, to set against the serious moments. We know comic relief takes us in a slightly different direction to the serious themes that helps us kind of just have a moment of rest or respite. So we're thinking about how Shakespeare does it. So we're going to build an answer to this question. And we did start last time we were together. So don't rush and misunderstand the next task, okay? Be ready to listen. So we have got here a mixed up table. We've got some examples of comic relief, and we've got some examples from the scene that we've looked at so far. So we've got comic relief, the use of stage directions, the use of misconceptions and misunderstandings, the use of slapstick and physical humour. But the examples from the scene have all been mismatched. So your job in a minute is that you are going to create this table in your book, but you are going to match the right example to the comic relief moment. So we've got use of stage directions, use of misconceptions and misunderstandings, use of slapstick and physical humour. And on the other side here, we've got examples from the scene we've been looking at. So in the scene we've been looking at, Caliban says, "Here comes a spirit of his." And Trinculo says, "Is it a man or a fish?" So you've got to decide, does that example match with stage directions, misconceptions and misunderstandings, or slapstick and physical humour? And into your book, you're going to write comic relief and you're going to match it to the right example. Now, it then says, Stefano says, "I'll pull thee by thy lesser legs." In other words, he's speaking about pulling out one of the 4 sets of legs that he can see poking out from under the gabardine. Is that a stage direction? Well, because Sebastian's speaking, we can actually work that one out really quickly. That can't be a stage direction. Is it a misconception or misunderstanding? Or is it a moment of what we might call slapstick and physical humour? Would that create a moment of Stefano doing something funny as he says his line? Now, the very last one, our example from the scene, is that somebody sings drunkenly. So is that a stage direction, a misconception and misunderstanding, or a use of slapstick? So, guys, I'm going to ask your teacher in a minute to pause the tape. That's me stuck in the 1980s. To pause the video. During that time, I want you to write down the table in your book, but so that it's correct. So on one column, you're going to have stage directions, misconceptions, misunderstandings, and slapstick physical humour as examples of comic relief. And then you're going to have the actual example from the scene. Now, could I just ask you to listen to this really importantly in this next point? We are going to add to this table. So it's important that you give yourself space to do so. So I reckon this is going to take, probably by the time you've got the table and things written in, about 4 minutes, because you've got to make the right choices. Now, the other thing that we're going to look at in a minute is a video, another YouTube video, just to summarize Act 2, Scene 2 so far. So my lovely adult in the room is going to have to maybe open up a second YouTube page and get this link set up for us, okay? So the lovely adult in the room, setting up a new link for us in a minute. The rest of you are getting this table recorded. I'll see you in a minute for the answers. Now, guys, as we go through the answers, hopefully we've got the other link ready to watch. It's only a short 3 minutes with somebody talking you through Act 2, Scene 2, which is our comedic scene, okay? Just to remind us and to get us all on the same page. So, guys, really quickly, were you right? So what's the example of stage directions? 3, 2, 1, say it for me. Yes, sings drunkenly. Now that's the stage direction. Nobody is speaking. You can see for the others, we've got C, T, and S to introduce the speaker. So sings drunkenly is the stage directions. And we saw last time as we tracked the stage directions, there is lots of drinking and singing in this scene. It's a big source of the humour. Drunken humour. We talked about it creating opportunities for exaggeration, funny accents, ways of behaving. Brilliant. Now, the use of misconceptions and misunderstanding goes to, brilliant. There it is. So the moment where Caliban says, here comes a spirit of his. So Caliban misunderstands Trinculo. He thinks Trinculo is a spirit sent by Prospero, but Trinculo is actually another human. So Caliban misunderstands as a misconception that leads to further humour later in the scene. And Trinculo misunderstands, misconceives what Caliban is. And he actually even says, is he a man or a fish? Brilliant. And then the use of slapstick physical humour is when Stefano's trying to pull out Trinculo and Caliban from under the gabardine. So we've got comic relief coming through those three examples. Now, as we watch a recap of the scene, I'm going to ask you to listen out for something. Okay, listen to what the lady says in amongst it, just a recap of the scene, is a source of humour. Which types of characters are used in a comedy scene, okay? And we're just going to add that to our table in a minute. So watch the extract, the recap video, and then we'll be back together to build on the lesson. Okay, so having watched that, quick question for you, because we're going to add it into our table together in a minute. What sort of characters are used for comic relief? Did you hear in the video? What sort of characters did she say? Is it the high status characters or the low status characters? Is it the lords and the dukes or the servants? So guys, which type of characters are used in comedy, in the comedic scenes? Yes, our low status characters. So guys, I just want you to add to your table, okay, that an aspect of comic relief is the use of low status characters. And our example would be that Stefano and Trinculo are servants. So we're just going to add that to our table. So can you see we're building up a table that just illustrates how comic relief is at work in this scene. So we now know, and I'm just talking as you're writing or adding to your table use of lower status characters, okay? That comic relief, we've got stage directions, misconceptions, misunderstandings, slapstick physical humour, and lower status characters. In other words, we're encouraged to laugh at servants. We're encouraged to laugh at people that are working class. We're encouraged to think that they are idiots and a bit foolish. Now, that might not be the best way to look at people in society that are lower status, but it was very much of that era. Okay, brilliant. So we're going to also have another little minute of a pause because I need us to make sure that we've got our copies of Act 2, Scene 2. Now, guys, because I know we're at the end of term and some of you are out, I'm going to ask that you maybe share one between two because I think there might be some left on the side of the classroom next to your books. But if not, it means I've got them in my bag. So we're going to just share it up today, okay? Now, to the adult in the room, these guys are amazing at volunteering to read. But they might feel a bit nervous today and they might not want to do it. But if any of them would like to volunteer to read, we can just encourage them to read from the board, okay? And we're going to read through the rest of Act 2, Scene 2. So we are all going to look and just give ourselves a minute to get our extracts out, to make sure if we need to share them around the room that it's at least one between two. And we're going to just make sure that we all find the moment on our sheets where Stefano says, "Prithee, do not turn me about, my stomach is not constant." Now, I'm just going to ask you to get yourselves ready. Okay, guys, you've got your copies of your scenes in front of you, and I just want to show you your table because we are going to add in some more examples. So we're going to find some examples of slapstick humour, misconceptions, and we're also going to add a new layer to our table, the play on words. But I would love if you guys are happy to read, that I am going to give you a minute to pause the screen and for you to quickly cast yourselves as Stefano, Caliban, and Trinculo, and for us to hear this scene read. Now, this is where it might get a bit awkward, because if you don't want to read and suddenly you're all embarrassed and the teacher's looking at you all blankly and nobody's putting up your hands to be Stefano, Caliban or Trinculo, which would surprise me because you've been reading beautifully, I will very quickly do a read version of this scene. So either at this point, the teacher has paused me and you guys are going to read through what's on the screen in front of you. From Stefano saying, "Prithee, do not turn me about," down to contents swear, the end of the page. If you need me to read it for you, because you will suddenly get really shy, just turn the volume up or put me on mute, one or the other. Okay? Okay, so read through what's on the board in your best Stefano, Caliban, and Trinculo words. Guys, those of you that were reading with us last week, what do we remember about these three? They're all getting a little bit drunk. They're all a little bit drunk. So if you feel brave enough to do a silly voice or to do, remember our hiccups, okay, or our burps in between a few of the speeches where we can see that they're getting drunk, go for it. If not, just read it normally. And then I'm going to just draw your attention to a few of the key ideas in this scene. Prithee, do not turn me about, my stomach is not constant. These be fine things, and if they be not sprites, that's a brave god, and bears celestial liquor. I will kneel to him. How didst thou escape? How camest thou hither? Swear by this bottle how thou camest hither. I escaped upon a butt of a sack which the sailors heaved overboard by this bottle, which I made of the bark of a tree with my own hand since I was cast ashore. I'll swear upon the bottle to be thy true subject, for the liquor is not earthly. Here, swear then how thou escaped. Swim sure, man like a duck, I can swim like a duck, I'll be sworn. Here, kiss the book, that thou can swim like a duck, thou art made like a goose. Oh, Stefano, hast thou more of this? The whole butt, man, my cellar is in the rock by the seaside, where my wine is hid. How now, mooncalf, how does thine ague? Hast thou not dropped from heaven? Out of the moon I do assure thee, I was the man in the moon when time was. I have seen thee in her, and I do adore thee. My mistress showed me thee in thy dog and thy bush. Come, swear to that, kiss the book, I will furnish it anon with my new contents swear. Now, guys, you either read that and muted me, or you've just been trying to speak over me and it was all a bit weird, so I do apologise. But I just want to draw attention, remember this is all about the comic relief. So the first thing everybody can circle on their sheets or get ready to write into their table is we get more slapstick and physical humour. Why is it funny that Stefano is saying, do not turn me about, my stomach is not constant? What have they all been doing? Brilliant, they've all been drinking. So at this point, Stefano's quite tipsy and he says, my stomach is not constant. In other words, he's feeling a little bit brilliant. He's feeling sick and he doesn't want to get turned about. He's feeling squeezy, a bit seasick. He's feeling poorly. So in your table where it says use of slapstick, physical humour, we can now add a new example. And our new example is, I'll pull thee by thy lesser legs. Do not spin me about, my stomach is not constant. So we are going to look at the examples and we're going to add them to our table. Okay, now look at this misconception, this misunderstanding. Poor Caliban, fueled by alcohol. What does he mistake Stefano for? These be fine things, and if they be not sprites, that's a brave god, and bears celestial liquor. I will kneel to him. Right, guys, what's the key word here that we need to circle that shows Caliban's misconception? Brilliant. Did you get it? So Caliban calls him a god. He calls Stefano a god, a brave god. And he says that Stefano's got celestial, which means heavenly liquor. So drink from the heaven. In other words, Caliban is getting tipsy and he mistakes Stefano, because of the alcohol, for being a god. And he very quickly says, I will kneel to him. So he very quickly gives allegiance and agrees to serve Stefano. And then again, he makes that same misconception. Hast thou not dropped from heaven? Stephano, have you not fallen from heaven? Are you not a god that's dropped from heaven? And then he really ramps it up. I do adore thee. So Caliban is feeding into this comic moment of misconceptions and misunderstandings. He mistakes Stephano for a god, and like a god has decided to worship him. Now, as you're writing into your table under misconceptions that Caliban mistakes Stephano for a god, just going to quickly tell you about one of my favourite films, Star Wars. But in Star Wars, actually in the third one, so the Return of the Jedi, there's a brilliant moment where all the cute little Ewoks mistake, not C3PO, the other one, the gold one, the shiny one. You know, the big shine. Oh, it's C3PO, R2D. No, it is C3PO, R2D2's the little one. And they mistake him for a god. So we often see in stories, anyway, was going off on a tangent, but you know me. Okay, so often in stories, misconceptions that create humour is where a human, a mere mortal, is mistaken for being a god, yet for having heavenly or celestial qualities. So everyone or a character ends up worshipping the other character because of that misconception. And in a way, though, it's quite poignant because Caliban is looking to be rescued. He's looking to be saved from himself and his miserable life. So he very quickly falls for a new god who simply gets him drunk. Okay, now this next bit, we have to add a new section to our table. So underneath use of lower status characters, we're going to add another aspect of comic relief is a play on words. It's puns. Now puns, play on words, this has often been a source of humour where you say something funny. And often words that are funny are because they play on ideas or they're a bit silly. So Trinculo says, I swim on like a duck. I can swim like a duck. And then Stephano says, duck, thou art more like a goose. So there's this play on words that they insult each other by making a humorous reference to Trinculo being like a duck and Stephano saying, no, you're more like a goose because a goose was a cowardly bird. So Stephano's insulting Trinculo. So humour there is coming from insults and those play on words. So lovely people, just pause a minute. I'll let the teacher, the lovely person in the room, just pause. And you're going to go back to this table and add, under lower status characters, use of puns, a play on words, for example, duck and goose. And you're going to add to misconceptions, misunderstandings, that Caliban mistakes Stephano for a god. And under slapstick and physical humour, that poor old Stephano is feeling sick. Okay, lovelies, your time starts now. Right, so we've looked at this bit. So we're going to look at the next section of the scene. And again, we're tracking these moments of comedy, how the comedy's being created. So readers, again, we need a Trinculo, a Caliban for this section, and a very brief visit from Stephano, or a few lines from Stephano. So if you're ready to read, just turn the volume down so you don't hear me. If you want to hear me read it, because we've got no volunteers, just keep the sound up. So here we go. By this good light, this is a very shallow monster. I have heard of him. A very weak monster, the man in the moon, a most poor credulous monster. Well drawn monster in good sooth. And I will show thee every fertile inch of the island, and I will kiss thy foot, I prithee be my God. By this light, a most perfidious and drunken monster, when God's asleep, will rob his bottle. I'll kiss thy foot, I swear myself thy subject. Oh, come on then, down and swear. I shall laugh myself to death at this puppy-headed monster, a most scurvy monster. I could find in my heart to beat him. Come, kiss. But that poor monster's in the drinking, an abominable monster. I'll show thee the best springs. I'll pluck thee berries. I'll fish for thee and get thee wood another plague upon the tyrant that I serve. I'll bear him no more sticks, but follow thee, thou wondrous man. Yeah. A most ridiculous monster to make a wonder of a poor drunkard. Right, guys, so just pause in a minute because we're going to add these to our table. So look, what are the moments of misconception? Yes, so it's just building on this idea that Caliban calls Stefano, "Be my God, I will worship you. I will kiss thy foot." Now, guys, we could put all of this kissing stuff under the slapstick as well. Because if you begin to imagine this, what is Caliban doing to kiss his foot? He's getting down on the ground. He's groveling. He's maybe drunk, so like trying to reach down to kiss his foot and falling over. So we could actually say that we've still got the misconception because Caliban is misunderstanding and believing that Stefano is a god. But we've got this sad extra like slapstick moment that he begins to try and kiss him, like to bow down and kiss his foot. So he says it again, "I'll kiss thy foot, I'll swear myself thy subject." And Stefano quite likes it. So Stefano's then like, "Come on down, yes, do, swear, come kiss." So Stefano's quite getting into the role. He's enjoying the adoration and the worship. So he's playing up to it. Now, our very last moment of comedy to add to our table. So we've got comic relief, we've got stage directions, yep. We've got misunderstandings and misconceptions. We've got puns. We've got the use of lower status characters. So we've got a lot going into that table. The last bit we need to add, though, is that in comedy, you often have foolish characters that have a moment of wisdom. So suddenly a stupid character will say something quite profound. Now, my favourite moment of this that does this lovely comic relief very, very well is one of my all-time favourite Disney films. Now, in The Lion King, there is a warthog. Yep, Timon and Pumbaa. Now, Pumbaa is presented always as being a foolish character. Yep. And he's silly and everyone misunderstands him and he's involved in a lot of the slapstick moments, but he's really wise. If you know the film, do you remember the moment they're all laying on their backs looking up at the stars and they're trying to talk about space? And Pumbaa gets it right. He says the stars are great big balls of gas. So he has this moment of wisdom, but the other characters laugh it off and they make a joke about with Pumbaa, everything's about gas. So I love that. I love that in The Lion King, Disney's Lion King, which is like, you know, a recent foray into comic filmmaking, it's using exactly these same moments. Because here we have Trinculo. Now, Trinculo has a moment of wisdom. So Trinculo is a drunk jester. He's a foolish, lower status character, but he suddenly gets it. So when we talk about a foolish character having a moment of wisdom, it's like Trinculo gets it. And he says, "Oh my goodness, you is a most ridiculous monster to make a wonder of a poor drunkard." In other words, he says out loud, "Caliban, you're being an idiot. If you are going to call this drunk guy Stefano a wonder, a god, then you're a fool." So suddenly Trinculo calls out what's happening. And he's wise enough to see it for what it really is. So, back to your table. We've got lower status characters, slapstick physical humour, misconceptions, misunderstandings, stage directions. We've added puns. Now we've got to add foolish characters having a moment of wisdom. And for our example, it will be Trinculo calling out Caliban. So, just onto your table. I've gone the wrong way. Yep. Just add to that table that another moment of comic relief is the moment we get to laugh at foolish characters having moments of wisdom. Brilliant. Okay, so we're just going to let, if you need to, you can just pause. So your table now, we're building these examples from our texts into that table. All right, my lovelies, so just give yourself a minute to do that. Okay, so we are just going to read to the end of the scene. Again, if we've got people in the room that are reading, you can just volume me out for this moment and read it to each other. Okay, and off you go. Or if you want to hear me read it, I'll read it. So Caliban, "I prithee let me bring thee where crabs grow, and I with my long nails will dig thee pig nuts, show thee a jay's nest, and struck thee out to snare the nimble marmoset. I'll bring thee to clustering filberts, and sometimes get thee young scammels from the rock. Will thou go with me? I prithee now lead the way without any more talking. Trinculo, the king and all our company else be drowned. We will inherit here. Here, bear my bottle, fellow Trinculo will fill him by and by again. Farewell, master, farewell, farewell. Oh, howling monster, a drunken monster. No more dams I'll make for fish, no fetching, firing, at requiring, nor scraping, trenching, or wash a dish. Ban, ban, bam, has a new master, get a new man. Freedom, hey day, freedom. Freedom, hey day, freedom. Oh, brave monster, lead the way. Okay, so we have, more songs being a source of humour, but I just actually want to end with not a comic moment, but this moment. Look at what Stefano says. We will inherit here. So the bigger context of this little bit from Stefano, he's acknowledging to Trinculo the king and all the company are drowned. So Stefano believes only him and Trinculo have survived. And so what immediately fills his head? What's the idea in Stefano's head, in his drunken, hazy head? We will inherit here. Is he thinking of something funny? Is this a link to the idea of comedy? Or is it taking us back to our serious theme of power? So in your answer, I just want you to just use this sentence just to do a summary in your book, because blank, it links to the idea of. So what do you think? Because he says we'll inherit here, what does that link to? What does it mean that Stefano thinks they're going to inherit here? What does Stefano think they're going to take over or be able to own or have ownership of? Yes, you got it. Because Stefano believes that they can take over the island, that they can inherit it. It links to the idea of, you got it, power. So even though we've got this scene full of comic relief, we cannot escape our serious point about power. And Stefano is going to misuse his power to take over the island. Which reminds us again that Shakespeare is showing us that people use power badly. It goes to their heads and they misuse it so badly in this play, don't they? So guys, I just want you to pause, get into your book, because it links to the idea of. So because Stefano plans to misuse this, to misuse the position, to inherit, to take over the island, it links to the idea of. Okay, so just get that written into your books. Okay, so we have successfully looked at how comic relief works in this scene. So your table should look a little bit like this. So I'm just going to allow Miss or Sir to leave this just to make sure we've got a good copy in our books of how comic relief works. So stage directions, misconceptions, slapstick, lower status characters, puns, play on words, foolish characters speaking wisdom. Now, if that table is complete, and with the time you've been given to do the tasks, you're at the end of the lesson, you've used your time, brilliant. If the time you've had and the length of the lesson means we've still got time available, just keep watching. I've kept the lesson going, but it's sometimes hard to judge where we're at. So this is a good checkpoint. If it's the end of the lesson, you've made it here, brilliant. If we've still got some time, it's one of those extra lessons where we've got a bit of extra time, stay with us. We're going to look from the comedy to something else. Now, we're going to think about from comedy to sadness and what the difference is between laughing at someone and laughing with them. And Caliban is one of those characters where we need to be working out all the time, is he a victim? Someone we can feel sorry for? Or if he's a baddie, if he's a villain, does that make it okay to laugh at him? Because we would argue that sometimes it's okay to laugh at characters if they're bad, if they're misbehaving, if they deserve it. Yeah, we would argue it's okay to laugh at someone if they deserve it. But if we're laughing at a victim, somebody that has been wronged or mistreated, actually suddenly it stops being funny. And then we have to be really careful. Are we meant to laugh with this person, at that person, or are we meant to actually react differently to them? So guys, into your books for me, could we just write down that a soliloquy is a speech where a character speaks to himself or herself to an audience? And then a monologue is a long speech by one person, but other characters are on stage. Now, we're going to have a look today at a Caliban monologue. Now, Caliban, all through this play, and we don't have time to look at every scene and every part, actually is quite often given a soliloquy or a monologue. In other words, Shakespeare trusts Caliban to be a voice in this play, to speak at length, to contribute ideas. So that immediately makes us think, is he just a baddie, a villain, that Shakespeare really wants us to see into the thoughts and ideas of? Or is Caliban getting to speak by himself at length because he has something to say that's going to help us understand that he's maybe a victim, that he's not somebody we should be laughing at? Now, guys, you can write down soliloquy and monologue while I'm just kind of talking to you. Because actually, we've just seen, haven't we, that Stephano and Trinculo are laughing at Caliban. They call him mooncalf, an insulting language. And they actually say, do you know what? If we could take Caliban either to England or to Naples, we could get a huge amount of money in freak shows. So in other words, allowing people to pay to come and see a creature like Caliban and to laugh at him. But is that right? Then we see Caliban in that comedic scene being a bit silly, getting drunk, singing, dancing, making promises, being foolish enough to think that Stephano's a god. So actually we can laugh at him because that's a bit idiotic. So with Caliban, we're always being challenged to think, how am I reading him? Is he a victim or a villain? Now we're going to just look at one of Caliban's monologues to help us think about that. So you haven't got a copy of this, we're just going to use it from the board. So Caliban delivers this. Now this is a monologue because he is speaking to Stephano and Trinculo who are with him. And this is what he says to them. So this is after Act 2, Scene 2, when he's taking them around the aisle and he's serving Stephano now. He's given his power to Stephano. He's following him around. And he says, be not afeared. So don't be afraid. The aisle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about mine ears, and sometime voices that if I then had waked after long sleep will make me sleep again. And then in dreaming, the clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again. Now, Caliban is given this monologue. He's trusted by Shakespeare to speak, and in it, he speaks in a way that shows a character's voice can sometimes challenge us to see them differently. He does not sound like a villain and a baddie here. He sounds quite sensitive. And we need to look at the language of how that's achieved. So if we just look, at the first couple lines of the monologue. So we're going to look at the first four, but beginning with these two. So here is Caliban saying, be not afeared. The aisle is full of noises, sounds, and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. So guys, just really quickly into your books. Number one, what is the island full of? And look at those S sounds in these two lines. How does Caliban make Trinculo and Stephano feel calm? Right, so brilliant. The island is full of, what's the answer? Noises. So this isle is full of noises. In other words, Caliban is telling them about his home, and he's showing that he knows his home, that this island is his, it's been his home. And yes, it's full of noises, but sounds and sweet airs. Look at that lovely use of the S's. It's alliterative, it's soft, it's soothing. So Caliban is speaking here in a way that's about calming Trinculo and Stephano. And he actually says that this island will give delight and hurt not. Do not be afraid. So actually Caliban is being really sensitive here. He's reassuring them. He's calming them down. He's helping them. This is not the actions or the voice of a villain. This is not somebody that's trying to threaten and intimidate others. This is somebody that's trying to help. And this is why we have to sometimes recognize Caliban's a really tricky character. He does a terrible thing. He does one terrible thing. And then everybody sees him as a monster because of that thing. But actually, Stephano and Trinculo didn't know about what he did to Miranda, did they? So their judgment of him is based purely on his physical appearance and that he looks different and sounds different. So it's the worst kind of discrimination. They're judging him on what they see and what they hear, not who he is. So this speech is his chance to show who he really is. And he's somebody that offers help and loves his island. Okay, so be not afeard, the isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about mine ears, and sometime voices. So what are two noises that Caliban hears on the island? And when he says he hears twangling instruments, how does this show Caliban appreciates language and mystery? How does this contrast with Prospero's opinion of Caliban? So Caliban is, in Prospero's eyes, a monster, isn't he? Does this sound how a monster would speak? No, it doesn't, does it? So he hears the sounds of instruments and voices. And he says that they're twangling instruments, so they're pretty. Now, this shows that Caliban can be descriptive, that he understands how to describe his island. In other words, he's learnt language and he's using it quite beautifully. He's mastered language. Now, somebody that can master language is not an idiot. Yeah, is not a savage. Is not somebody that just deserves to be laughed at in a freak show. So Shakespeare is showing us through Caliban's own language that we could see Caliban more of a victim than we realise. He is clever, he knows his home, he has knowledge and understanding, but he is different to the humans, to the others. And it's his difference that means they treat him like a villain, that they treat him like a monster. So I think Shakespeare's saying something here about how we judge and treat others. So let's look at this one. Look at these next two lines. These will hum about my ears and sometime voices that if I then had waked after long sleep. Okay. So Caliban repeats the word sleep and talks of dreaming. So this extract, could it be like a lullaby? How could this be like a lullaby? And what does this tell you about Caliban's character? That he speaks like a lullaby, that he talks of his dreams. How does this compare to Prospero's description of Caliban as a devil? Are the two things coming together? Can we see Caliban as a devil if he speaks like this? Or actually, are we being shown that Prospero's wrong in calling Caliban a devil? So just have a think about your answers to those questions. Okay, and now we're just going to look at the last bit together, okay? The clouds methought, that if I had waked after long sleep will make me sleep again, and then in dreaming, the clouds methought would open and show riches, ready to drop upon me, that when I waked, I cried to dream again. Okay, guys, so for this section, what does Caliban dream of? So just complete this statement for me. Caliban dreams of. Now, guys, is this the dream of a monster? Do you think this is what a monster should dream of, or it isn't? So just copy this statement, making your choice. This is or isn't the dream of a monster because. So it has that lovely image, doesn't it? The clouds methought would open and show riches ready to drop upon me. Now, and then this bit, and it always makes me feel a bit sad, this bit. And then when I waked, I cried to dream again. So why does Caliban cry when he wakes up? Can you complete this statement for me? Caliban would rather be asleep dreaming than awake living because. So what are we meant to remind ourselves of about Caliban's quality of life when he's awake? How's he being treated? How's Prospero treated him? How's other people treated him? So actually we can see just in Caliban's words here, is he a victim or a villain? So finish those sentences, and that definitely should be the end of our lesson together today, guys. I look forward to working with you tomorrow.